I cannot fail from commenting that we've had two altogether different statements right now. This is probably how it looks like in the European Parliament. But anyway, Mr. Chrenek mentioned two things that I found very interesting. First of all, that banks in Slovakia are stable. And second of all, that there should be fair taxation. I couldn't agree more. But before I proceed to my presentation, I would like to tell you one interesting story. It is about how bankers are popular, and they seem to be even less popular than lawyers these days in the public. I went to this party and I mentioned an acquaintance who is our client, and she asked me if I couldn't add 3 zeros to her bank account statement, and I was like, well, no, I cannot do it. And she was like, okay, could you do this to all clients? And I said, well, yeah, maybe I could do it, but I just couldn't. It wouldn't last long, but for a brief time period in history, maybe people would really like banks, so maybe we can try this out. Anyhow, why should banks, should they pay higher taxes or not? In Slovakia, as it was mentioned, we have a stable, healthful banking sector which went through the crisis through turbulent waters quite fluently. It even generated profits. Only some smaller banks suffered some damages, and we pay very high taxes, and yet we asked for no support from the state. On the other hand, it was mentioned that banks are like casinos. Maybe in some cases it is like that, but in Slovakia I have to tell you that banks deal in very general banking activities. They provide credits. They assess risk, they just do regular things, and their assets toward GDP, the average growth rate, and all these numbers, you can see that on one hand banking is much less extensive. Well, the market is kind of underbanked, and on the other hand banks can fulfill their task, which is support to economic growth and support to economy by providing liquidity through credits. And thirdly, you can see an unexpectedly high ratio of financing the state by state bonds. The EU average is about 4%, and the only country that comes close to us with about 10% of this balanced sum of banks that are created from investments into state benefits. But here it's 21%, so banks, they finance about 1/2 of state debt in Slovakia. Are they profitable? Well, in the region they are the poorest, and if we abstain from Hungary, where banks had a very tough year last year, it wasn't a single year that Slovak banks would have more than the lowest yield on capital compared to Poland or Czech Republic. In those countries, banks have much higher return on capital. If you take a look, if they make that much money, is that in the first 20 there are 4 banks. Well, there are companies that earn much more, and we will take a look at fairness, how much who is contributed to taxes and bank deficits. Last year we had a record sales growth was about 30-35%. In 2010 there was a -40 growth, that there was a 40% drop. Nobody mentions this, so statistics is the greatest lie if you only use arguments that are in supporting your point. On one hand, banks had a great year because they were dissolving reserves they did not need for failed credits, and they were saving because banks took very serious approach, and unlike the state that is trying to pull money out of them, banks would cut their own piece of cake. are our clients that dissatisfied? Because we keep hearing that clients are dissatisfied. And this morning there was a press conference of the SDKU party, and I was quite surprised by what was said. And I guess we live in the time where opposition and coalition, everybody is trying to be harder and harder on banks, because if you hurt banks, you win votes. And it was said at this press conference how that competitiveness is very low, and if you read report of the National Bank of Slovakia of the first quarter of this year, which was presented by Mr. Dvořáček, who is present here, you will read that there is a great competition in the area of mortgages and also in the area of current accounts. And this decreases margins of bankers, and this is quite transparent. So I'm not sure if opposition is trying to win votes or if they're trying to resolve some individual mortgages of some members of parliament. But the fact is that Slovak clients are very satisfied with banks if we compare it against the European average, and especially if we compare it with other industries. So how high taxes should banks be paying? Well, just as any other active part of the economical cycle, just as any other entity that works here. But it's not like that, because we have the flat tax of 19%, but banks already pay 40%, and it will be more. I would like to draw your attention to these charts, maybe some figures. Here is first is income after taxation of 2010, and in 2011 it was somewhere here about 800 million. But you can see also some other industries that are not poor, but if we take a look at how they will contribute to these levies and consolidating the state debt or the deficit of the state budget, and how much banks will contribute, it is very improportional. And if you take a look at the effective tax burden, then banks will be paying about 44%, and this does not include all VAT payments, because banking services are not liable to VAT, because banks have a zero VAT coefficient. So everything we buy, everything we invest to, we never get a single euro out of it. So if you calculate this in, then we are somewhere about at 55% of effective taxation. So what we see here is a very unfair state that banks are being punished for achieving profit. By the way, today taxation in Slovakia is the second highest in the European Union, right after Hungary. And if we adopt, if the new draft law on bank taxation is adopted, then we reach number one. We would be we would be heading this list. And let us just keep our fingers crossed that it doesn't end up as it did